It's ANZAC Day week, and the Veterans Families Support Organisation and Veterans Support Organisation Legacy knows better than anyone the impact that war has on the lives of those who serve and their families. Legacy Australia started with a promise on the battlefield in World War I when an Australian soldier pledged to look after the wife and family of his dying mate. The Legacy promise hasn't changed in over 100 years, but the approach has.
For over 100 years, Legacy has been entering the homes of the families of our fallen and injured veterans to listen, understand and respond with compassion and practical support.
I believe it was around 2015 that I first came into contact with Legacy. So at that time, my husband was struggling. I had 3 children. There was financial difficulty. There was a lot of stress, obviously, a lot of anxiety. So Legacy provided really practical support. They came and spoke to me at a time that was convenient for me. Without Legacy's support at that time, I think that I would have been overwhelmed.
Legacy operates all around Australia. One of its biggest projects underway right now is the building of Legacy House on the site of Brisbane's Greenslopes Hospital. The idea being to be able to welcome veterans into a place that feels like home, somewhere they can get comprehensive support and care that they need with warmth, understanding and efficiency. And joining us now on the other side to talk about it is Brandon Cox, the CEO of Legacy in Brisbane. Brendan, thanks very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule in ANZAC week to come and have a chat with us. We really appreciate it.
Greatly appreciate the time you're giving me, Damian.
So, Brendan, Legacy's history is about supporting families of fallen veterans. Yes. You're broadening that a little bit lately, moving into supporting veterans in need and their families still that have come home from the battlefield.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about.
Yes, certainly. So, Damian, for 100 years, Legacy has walked into the living rooms of our fallen. We have administered our services to ensure no social or financial disadvantage to those families, and every family has its own unique circumstances. The power of Legacy is a relationship between that family and our volunteers we call legatees. So that model of care will continue for the next 100 years plus. There is an element of our charter in which we must also support the families of the incapacitated veteran. Of course, incapacitation can be both physical and mental. And until 1980, PTSD was not diagnosable. So prior to 1980, things such as mental health were termed of battle fatigue or
shell shock.
Shell shock, and they were somewhat of a derogatory term to the military member, as if I was not as strong as the others, as my mates. So we have learnt a lot as a community about mental health and the need to support those who are going through a trauma, but also do the therapies to support them. So Legacy House at Greenslopes is a response to acknowledging what the Royal Commission is telling us into Defence and Veteran Suicide, is that the clinical and non-clinical worlds must come together to build a resilience program that ideally keeps veterans out of the clinical care system, that warmly navigates them into a community where we support that journey, and also listen to the family, not forgetting that there's a lot of talk about veteran. There's not enough talk about the partner and children. I think Nick Caldos, the Commissioner for the Royal Commission, has done a brilliant job in identifying the impact on families. And he said it is obvious, the evidence is there, that the service to our country by the veteran has a direct impact on their families. We always knew that. So Greenslopes and New Legacy House at Greenslopes is acknowledging those clear statements being given to us by the Royal Commission.
So this house is going to be clear. This is a national importance because this is going to be the first of its type in the country. And it's setting a model that you want to see rolled out. You undertook a Churchill Fellowship last year. I understand you want to tell us a little bit about that and how this work has extended from that.
Yeah, absolutely, Damian. I've been on the journey for about 6 to 7 years. We did a deep dive into what we call our Family Assist program, which is this incapacitated veteran support to that family. And what we learned is that unless we are working very closely with RSL, mates to mates, open arms, we were always dealing with symptom, not cause, if I can be as brash as that. And unless we dealt with the family unit inclusive of the veteran, as opposed to veterans, some people doing stuff, and family, others doing stuff, we were never going to solve their problems. We were never going to meet their needs.
And this is what the Royal Commission said.
Absolutely. And so this is what the Churchill Fellowship was all about. Right. So I did a Paul Teese Churchill Fellowship to investigate better models of care to those families supporting a veteran with mental health and also physical injury. Visited the US, UK, amazing organisations doing amazing work. Now the interesting part in the UK is they have developed a whole new system of care for veterans that is based on, as they transition out and are identified as needing support, there is a multidisciplinary team within the NHS, their National Health System, in which they are now warmly integrated into their community. So here is your GP, here is your physio, here is your specialists of wrapping around the whole family. So
that takes a lot of pressure off, because just that alone, and people don't, the pressure of finding these resources, getting this help when you need it, and it leads to people saying, well, and it's a big step for a lot of veterans, I suppose, to just take that first step. You don't want to be hindering them in any way.
That's
you don't
right.
want them going, oh, this is all too hard, I'm going to give up, after they've made the commitment and sort of gotten through to kind of seeking help. Right?
And remembering, Damian, most veterans transition to community very smoothly, very easily, valued contributors to all aspects of our community. We are talking about the top 5 to 6% that are struggling due to the service to our country. We have a national obligation to not only support veterans in that place. When a defence member joins, a family serves. When the defence member's health is impacted, we have an obligation to support that family. Because if that family supports the veteran, we have to just maintain that family unit, and we are now contributing back into society with a good, resilient veteran who has issues, yes. They're issues that are natural from being exposed to traumatic events in the service to our country.
And this may not be the weakest 5%.
They are
might be the strongest 5%,
Absolutely.
The toughest 5% that serve harder.
We have to defeat that.
It's not a...
Absolutely, Damon. Sorry. We have to defeat that stigma.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we all have physical health, we all have mental health. Based on the challenges we meet in both realms, we will respond to that either positive or negative. Every person with a mental health issue can seek therapies and support. The more they are connected, the stronger they will be. The more connected that family is, the more healthier they are to give support to the veteran, because they're the ones living with them 24/7. If we don't support them and teach them to put their mask on first before helping the veteran, worse things can happen.
Right.
Bad things can happen.
Yeah.
We all know about that. We see it playing out constantly on the TV.
Yeah, look, sadly we do hear, so many terrible stories these days, and veteran suicide is a real issue.
Yes.
Are we getting any closer to understanding it more deeply, to understanding, and is the treatments for PTSD and things like that, are they getting better, the protocols and medicines?
Yeah, Damien, it's a really good question. I think, and probably going out on a limb here, I think we've done enough research. I think we have enough evidence. The challenge to us now is to come together, forget about our organisational constraints and what criteria you can come in or we don't meet you with. We are too institutional in our approach. We actually are talking about ourselves when people seek help. This is what I can do for you, but you're saying this. So you're outside the parameters. Good luck, go find someone else.
Yeah, right.
So what we need to is DVA, Department of Defence, the ex-service sector, the for-purpose sector and the clinical world, the health system, need to come together and say, how do we listen to their story and respond to their story as opposed to focus on what we do and don't do for them.
Yeah, it's funny how organisations, whether they're corporate, government, institutional or service organisations, volunteer organisations, will have a very inward perspective after a while, start talking more about how they're operating than what they're actually there to achieve.
The greatest value we can all have is empathy.
Yeah.
And empathy demands that we must listen to the other person's story. And by listening to their story, we can respond in a very conscious manner. So the idea out of Green Slopes is that through this multidisciplinary team approach, we're all listening to that story and seeing what we all can do. So rather than this family navigating around southeast Queensland looking for the support they need, they're the ones in trauma. They're the ones we need to stabilise. They come through one door, one story, heard by all those social prescribing agencies who are now connected into the Keith Payne Mental Health Unit. They are now connected into Green Slopes Hospital. And now the therapies and programs that we are putting together will be evaluated by Gallipoli Medical Research Foundation located there as well.
Oh, right, okay.
When we now have this system of care, because at the moment our challenge is we have very good eco-silos. Department of Veterans Affairs is an effective organisation. Department of Defence is an effective organisation, but they don't correlate their information flow very well.
Right.
So let's create the system above all of these silos and make it a system of excellence as opposed to silos of excellence that can actually work against each other. And that's really frustrating for a family in trauma.
Yeah. So what you're doing is you're really putting that overlay that brings the focus back to the client.
Exactly.
It brings the focus back to serving the person that's supposed to be served at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that all of these agencies and all of these organisations are able to serve that client and giving the client one place to go to, right, to get that. I think the physical, we underestimate in this sort of digital world that we live in, the importance of the physical space.
Yeah.
So the house is designed to put all that in one place, right, and also create an environment that feels right, I suppose. Is that?
That is absolutely it, Damian.
Okay.
Geography is one element of this. You know, being at Green Slates, where all those physical, mental, research capabilities already reside in support of veterans and their families.
Now, Green Slopes in Brisbane, for people who don't know, that
Yes.
hospital was a veterans hospital. Has always been a
correct.
hospital that's very focused on return servicemen, but and women. But this is going to take that a step further, obviously, and is the model for doing this elsewhere. I mean, you're hoping this is going to take off and be applied in Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide and Perth and Hobart.
Absolutely. So the idea is to operate this system through the primary health networks. So the primary health networks work throughout Australia. Now that we capture veteran data where families are living through the ABS data, we know from a Queensland perspective that Brisbane North and Brisbane South PHNs, so pretty much southeast Queensland, and also North Queensland, you know, because of Townsville, has a higher concentration of veterans and their families than the other PHNs within the state.
Oh, okay.
So now we can apply this model, the resources which are finite, to the areas in which there are high demand. Now, of course, there will be regional and remote veterans and their families who are also in need of support. But what we can do there is either use the telehealth or Zoom or IT sort of infrastructure to at least reach out, or do fly in, fly out. And this is one of the great learnings out of the US, an amazing organisation called Homebase, based in Boston. They are set up deliberately to support their veterans and their families, primarily those, of course, in mental health, poor mental health. Also families that have had a veteran who has suicide, and therefore the ripple effect and their likelihood of suicide ideation is increased. So they bring them together. They fly them in, no expense to them, so there's no barriers to seeking support. They fly them in, house them, a 2-week very intensive course, but they are changing the whole mindset of every cohort that goes through. Yeah. We need a similar approach. We need a similar approach in which they come to one location to get the support in their local area, but a complementary approach of then reaching out to those who can't get in for whatever reason that may be. There's no simple solution here.
No. It's fascinating what we're learning, though, in neuroscience now, too, in relation to the training of the brain's fight and flight response or these triggers. I mean, if people think of mental illness as being psychological or of the mind rather than of the brain, it's a combination of both, right? And the brain, if it's not working properly, all the mind interventions, the psychological interventions won't work. Sometimes you need the medication to get the brain working, then the psychological interventions will work. So it's like, but it's for a guy who's, prided himself on serving his country, being strong, having that strong masculine, drive to protect and be a serviceman. It can be tough to face the fact that, hang on, my cognition's not quite right. It's not a reflection on my personality or my psychology. No. I've got to fix that, get that fixed first. That's just a reaction to the triggers and training and stimulation that my brain's copped during these war events, right?
Yeah.
And so it takes a little understanding of that. Then you've got to heal it, right? And then you've got to work on the psychological. So it's a pathway.
It is a total pathway, and it's a constantly moving pathway.
Yeah.
We don't know what the triggering events are sometimes. It could be an ANZAC day in which
right.
you do reflect, and all of a sudden, you start self-administering alcohol or other drugs, to soothe what you think is the right way. Now, the people who are going to identify that first up are going to be your family members. So we can teach them the psychoeducational tools on increasing the help-seeking behaviour of that veteran. Intuitively, you'll reduce the suicide rates coming out of the veteran community. Not forgetting, veterans are trained. So I did 26 years in the military. I loved every day of my service. I wish I could be still serving now, but I was actually physically broken at the end good infantry career, jumped out of
You don't
planes.
look too physically broken. I gotta tell you.
No.
You're pretty fit for
Absolutely.
a fella our age.
But and I run 10Ks a day, Monday to Friday.
Right.
So I am absolutely physically fit. But when I left and transitioned, I had to have spinal surgery, shoulder surgeries, but I'll do it all over again. The issue here is that veterans are trained, so I was infantry, we were trained to run at someone shooting at us. We were trained that you serve by your mates. It is a highly demanding career, a lot of physical and mental application. And I've got to say, I always felt very comfortable overseas serving side by side with Australians because I could really,
Rely on each other.
rely on it. The tribalism is strong.
Yeah.
So when those exit away from the tribe army says, sorry mate, you're broken, you've got to leave now, and we're giving you about 8 weeks to transition out. The psychological effect is not even just the battlefield trauma, it's like my identity has just been taken from me, from the group that built it. So sometimes we have to untrain that aggression that we used on the battlefield to survive. And so when that person cuts us off at the road, we don't need to jump out of the car and try and beat them. We need to say you're in a safe environment in your community now. So there is an element of this transition that if we can support it better, that if we can prepare that veterans transition out of, at a point where they're struggling with why is this happening to me, to wrap around services to the family to say it's okay though, we can land you softly into your new community with all the support you need. But we also need you to start connecting into, if you played Aussie Rules, we'll join your Aussie Rules club.
Yeah, you've got to find those other organisations and that other community engagement.
Redefine your new tribe.
Right.
So
redefine your new tribe.
Yeah, so they can only do that with the support of the community though.
Yeah.
What we don't.
Well, now I want to ask you about that. What do you reckon is the state of the community support at the moment? I mean, it's not Vietnam where we've got people booing and hissing at soldiers, but we live in a society that's fairly anti-masculine. It lives under the protection of the military, but we forget that.
Yeah.
We forget that there's people at the front line protecting our country. We live inside it and then, think that this is normal, this security that we have. We take it for granted. We don't respect masculinity or men or any of those values anymore. Forgive me for editorialising. I might be editorialising a bit, but do you feel that that's sort of, there is a cultural shift that's having a bit of an impact, or generally are people pretty good?
Look, I think they're pretty good towards our veterans and family members. I reflect on our first deployment in World War I. Nation of around 4.9 million, if give or take. We had 2 goes of saying, should we do conscription? Both times were defeated. Then we deploy the first AIF. Out of an eligible 1 million cohort of volunteering age of our male population, 417,000 volunteered.
Wow.
Now that's amazing for a young country.
Yep.
Now that included Indigenous, non-Indigenous, immigrants. In the first AIF, they found equality because together they fought and survived and died on the battlefield. Sometimes peace allows us to create labels in our community that actually don't survive the first shot and bottle.
Yeah.
So, there's no atheists in a foxhole. There's no labels in a foxhole.
Yeah.
It's you and your mate. So the military, I think, still has an area of reverence, an area of revere within the community. There's some aspects of the community that don't like Defence Force, and that may be because of their past or whatever. But I was
tends to sit above the fray when it comes to all that nonsense we carry on with most of the time.
Yeah, and look, as a veteran, I don't even listen to it. Yeah. I look at my mates when they march. I was at Maruka State School on the day before ANZAC. I was talking to primary kids. I looked at the way, with great reverence, they conducted their service, and that was with teachers, that was with parents. I do actually believe the community is getting stronger around ANZAC. I'm concerned about what happens with Australia Day and how we're treating that, but I think ANZAC, the day itself, and the way that we see our military and how they contribute to our community on such a regular basis. And these people put on a uniform. By putting on that uniform, you are saying, I am prepared to give up my life for this country. That's a pretty heavy uniform to wear for a long period of time and even a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think ANZAC Day, I love it. You know, it brings on tears, it brings on emotions, but it brings on an absolute source of pride about the service given to the country.
Brandon, thanks so much for coming out, your time today. Really do appreciate it. And we'll put I think we've had it on the screen, but it's bringithome.org.
Yeah, look, the campaign itself, it's a $9 million project. We've raised 8.3. We have 700,000 to go.
Well, let's get there.
Absolutely. You know, so if there's any people out there that understand corporations, foundations, trusts, you know, help us bring it home.
Thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully that will roll out all over the country eventually.
Wonderful,
and
wonderful.
Your work will be complete, sir.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks for your time, Brendan. Take care. Did you like that content? If you did, there's a lot more where that came from. It comes from a show called The Other Side, and it drops every Friday at 8 p.m. on Australia's ADH.tv, which you can watch for free on any browser. Or you can watch us right here on YouTube. Just remember to please support us by subscribing. Punch that subscribe button and the little bell next to it. Do it now, please.